On the 10th of June 2010, in a residence in the town of Vespasiano, in the metropolitan ring of Belo Horizonte, a young woman, Eliza Samudio, was killed. She was 25, the mother of a 4-month-old child. She had traveled to Minas Gerais 6 days earlier on the promise of a private settlement. This settlement was a fiction. Eliza did not come back. Her child was recovered alive 3 weeks later. Her body has never been found. The man who ordered her killing is named Bruno Fernandes das Dores de Souza. He was then the starting goalkeeper of the. He was convicted of ordering her killing in March 2013. In a jury court in the city of Contagem, 3 other men were convicted alongside him. The convictions have held. Since 2017, he has been released, returned, paroled, recaptured, and released again. He has never on the public record said where Eliza is. Her mother, Sonia Moura, has said that her own bedroom is her daughter's tomb. I guess there is no other one. In the United Kingdom, a similar case in 1988 produced 3 decades later a statute called Helens Law. The statute requires the Parole Board to consider a killer's refusal to disclose the location of the victim's remains. Brazil has no equivalent. This episode asks what that gap looks like 16 years on from the family. This channel is called Quiet Hill. This is the case of Eliza Samudio and the body that was never found. Chapter 1. Eliza Dottono. Eliza Silva Samudio was born on the 22nd of February 1985 in Foz do Iguaçu, in the far west of Paraná. It is border country where Brazil meets Argentina and Paraguay across the Iguaçu and the Paraná River. Her father was an architect, Luis Carlos Samudio. Her mother was a farmer from the same region, Sonia Fátima Silva Moura. The marriage did not survive the first year of Eliza's life. Her parents separated when she was 6 months old. The detail of the childhood that followed is the kind one writes down once and does not embellish. Eliza grew up wanting out. At 13, she said she would leave for the southeastern cities and become a model. At 18, she left Sao Paulo. In the early 2000s was a city in which the path to modeling was narrower than the path to small. She took work as a sex worker under a stage name to keep herself in the city while she chased agencies. She also walked runways in the same window. Her attorney would later confirm this on the record, because the implicit suggestion in some early coverage that her death was less mournable for that history, he didn't answer. The answer was that Eliza had supported herself in a city she had moved to alone. She was 24 years old when she met the man who belonged. They met at Tarasco, a barbecue at the Rio de Janeiro residence in May 2009. Bruno Fernandes das Dores de Souza was 25. He had broken through at Atlético Mineiro and had been the starting goalkeeper of Flamengo since 2007. By that spring, he was its captain. He had a wife, a country property near Esmeraldas, northwest of Belo Horizonte, a residence in Vespasiano, a circle that traveled with him. Eliza became pregnant in August 2009. When she told him, he ended the relationship. He denied paternity. He instructed her to terminate. She refused. He refused. On the 12th of October 2009, according to the report she filed the next day, Eliza was taken by Bruno and two associates to a residence, held, beaten, forced to ingest substances to terminate the pregnancy, and threatened. She was 4 months pregnant. The next day she went to a police station in Rio and asked for a protective measure under the Lei Maria da Penha. The Lei Maria da Penha is the 2006 statute written to allow Brazilian judges to issue emergency protections to women at risk from intimate partner. The judge denied the petition. The grounds were that the relationship had been, in the judge's reading, purely occasional sexual and did not qualify for protection. Eliza had reported a kidnapping. The state had recorded it. The state had then declined to act because the doctrine in force read the statute narrowly. 8 months later, she was dead. The boy was born on the 10th of February 2010 in Sao Paulo. Eliza named him Bruno. We distinguish him from the man who Through the spring of 2010, a paternity action moved slowly through the family courts of Rio. In late May, an invitation arrived from one of Bruno's associates. Chapter 2, The Disappearance. The invitation came from a man named Luis Henrique Pereira Romao. He told Eliza, according to the prosecution's reconstruction, that Bruno was willing to acknowledge the boy and that a settlement had been negotiated. The simplest way to conclude the matter would be for her to travel from Rio to Minas Gerais with the child while the paperwork was completed. He paid for a room at the Transamerica Hotel in the Barra da Tijuca district of Rio for the days before the trip. He paid for travel. On Friday, the 4th of June 2010, Eliza traveled with the child to Minas Gerais. What happened over the next 6 days became the subject of the investigation. The Polícia Civil of Minas Gerais opened on the 26th of June. It was also the subject of depositions that emerged in early July. We'll be beginning with the cousin, Sergio Rosa Sales, who at 17 described what he had seen. Eliza and the child were taken first to Bruno's country property near Esmeraldas, then to a residence in Vespasiano. In the metropolitan ring of Belo Horizonte. At one point, the child was separated from his mother. He would be recovered alive by police on the 7th of July. In Ribeirão das Neves, where he had been left with an acquaintance, he was unharmed. The killing, according to the depositions that emerged from the July arrests, was carried out by an ex-military police officer named Mar Santos. The mechanism described in the initial confessions was strangulation. The depositions described after the killing, dismemberment, and disposal. One element of those early depositions became the single most repeated detail of the case in the press. The claim was that parts of the body had been fed to Rottweiler dogs kept at the country property. The claim originated in one deposition, was partially retracted in a later statement, and was contested by the physical examination of the dogs themselves. It was the detail the press latched onto. It was not the detail that the prosecution ever needed in order to convict. Whatever had happened to the remains, the search for them in the subsequent weeks and months produced nothing recoverable. The arrest came quickly. On the 7th of July 2010, the Justice of Minas Gerais issued preventive arrest warrants for Bruno and 7 others. Bruno was taken into custody. Flamengo suspended his contract on the 8th of July and dismissed him for just cause on the 15th. Macarao was arrested. Bola, the ex-policeman, was arrested on the 8th of July. Bruno's wife and an ex-partner who had been at the country property during the holding and then released. 2 other associates were arrested and charged in connection with the kidnapping of the child. By the middle of July 2010, the case had moved from a missing persons report to a preventive detention order against the captain of the body had not been recovered. Chapter 3, the trial document. The principal jury trial opened on the 19th of November 2012 in the comarca of Contagem. In the metropolitan ring, the presiding judge was Eliza Fabiane Lopes Rodrigues. The prosecution was led by Henry Wagner Vasconcelos de Castro. The jury. The trial was procedurally disrupted from the first day. The defense attorneys for Bola withdrew on the opening day, citing what they characterized as a curtailment of their right of defense. On the second day, Bruno's own defense team asked to be dismissed. The request was denied. By the third day, Bruno's trial was severed from the consolidated proceeding and rescheduled. The case against Macarao proceeded. He was convicted of qualified homicide and corpse concealment and sentenced to 15 years. Bruno's own jury trial set in March 2013. On the 8th of March 2013, the jury returned a guilty verdict for triple qualified homicide. The qualifying elements were motivo torpe, base motive, asphyxiation as the means, and the frustration of the victim's defense. Separate counts were returned for kidnapping, false imprisonment of the child, and concealment of the corpse. The sentence, imposed by Judge Eliza Fabiane Lopes Rodrigues, was in total 22 years and 3 months. The principal homicide count carried 17 years and 6 months in closed regime. Bola was tried separately on the 26th and 27th of April 2013 in the same comarca. He was convicted of homicide and corpse concealment. He received 22 years. In late August 2013, the 2 further associates were convicted on the kidnapping charges relating to the child and received short sentences in open regime. Sergio Rosa Sales, the cousin, whose first deposition in July 2010 had cracked the case open, did not live to testify at the principal trial. In August 2012, he was shot dead in Belo Horizonte, pursued by men on motorcycles. He died of 6 bullet wounds. The investigation into his killing has not produced a conviction. The Bruno verdict in March 2013 is, in the technical sense, the part of the case that interests the doctrinal literature beyond the femicide context. Brazilian criminal procedure had incorporated the principle of corpus delicti, the requirement that the materiality of the crime be demonstrable. In a homicide case, the traditional demonstration was the body itself. The conviction did not invent the doctrine of indirect proof. What it did was prosecute that doctrine successfully in front of a jury with defendant of Chapter 4, the body dots. The search for Eliza's body began in operational terms in the second week of July 2010 and has not formally ended. Police excavated Bruno's country property near Esmeraldas across several visits in 2010 and 2000. They deployed ground-penetrating equipment, dog teams, successive teams of officers turning over earth on the property. The swimming pool was scanned by sonar. The well was searched. The kennels were dismantled. No remains were recovered. In June 2012, Eliza's mother received an anonymous letter purporting to indicate the location of the body. The lead pointed to an area near the international airport of Confins on the outskirts of Belo Horizonte. Police excavated the indicated zone over several days in late June 2012, working a pit roughly 15 meters by 10 meters by 3 meters by 3 meters deep. They found trash. The retractions and reconfessions of the conspirators over the next 3 years pointed in turn at different sites. Bola at one point indicated a location where he had said the remains were buried. The site was excavated, nothing was found. The sites that emerged from the various depositions were searched and researched. Several of them were searched more than basis of new claims from Coda. The search has continued in fits and starts since. In April 2025, 15 years after the disappearance, Sonia Moura received from Brazilian Federal Police a small box of items that had been held as evidence since 2010. Shoes, sunglasses, a burned photograph, items, not bones. In January 2026, an old passport of Eliza's was reported to have been found in an apartment in Portugal and delivered to the Brazilian consulate. A passport, not bones. The body has not been recovered. There is in the public record of the case no statement from Bruno Souza in which he describes with operational specificity where Eliza is. He has, across 16 years, given several versions of his role in the events of June 2010. Each version relocates responsibility. One of them produces a location and can be recovered. He knows the answer to the question Eliza's mother has been asking for 16 years. He has not given it. The administrative file of the case continues to record Eliza Samudio as a homicide victim whose remains have not been recovered. And Chapter 5, the boy Dr. Bruno Samudio de Souza, called Bruninho, was born on the 10th of February 2010. He was 4 months old on the day his mother was killed. He spent the following 6 days in the custody of 2 of his father's associates. He was recovered by police on the 7th. Custody of the infant was contested between several relatives. The formal custody granted by the family courts was to Eliza's mother, Sonia Fatima Silva Mora. The boy has been raised by Sonia in Campo Grande, the capital of Mato Grosso do Sul, where she had moved to be near her surviving daughter. He has attended school there on a scholarship. Eliza's brother and sister have been present in his life. He has, from a relatively early point, asked about his mother and his father. He has chosen, in the way adolescents choose these things, to play football. He has chosen to play goalkeeper. It is the position his father played. It is also the position his mother, as a girl in Foz do Iguaçu, had played in futsal. As of 2025, he was enrolled in the Youth Academy of Botafogo de Futebol Regatas in Rio de Janeiro, on playing for the Brazilian under-15 national team. In the second half of 2025, he saved a penalty in a continental final. Brazil won. He has given a small number of interviews in 2025 and 26 in one. He said the phrase that became the headline, "So, tenho pena, I only feel pity." In another, after a planned and then cancelled meeting, he said publicly that his father had cancelled it. He said he had wanted to ask him one thing. The thing he indicated was the location of his mother's body. He has gone further than any other person in directly asking Bruno Souza that question. He has not been answered. Chapter 6, the releases. In February 2017, 6 years and 7 months after his initial preventive detention, Bruno Souza was granted a habeas corpus by an injunction issued by a minister of the Supremo Tribunal Federal. The grounds were procedural. The release did not disturb the conviction. He was released on the 24th of February 2017. Within 15 days, he was signed as goalkeeper by Boa Esporte Clube, a third division Brazilian football club based in Varginha, in an area. The signing produced an immediate public reaction. Within days, several of the club's sponsors withdrew their endorsements. Human Rights Watch issued a statement in March 2017 calling the signing. On the 8th of April 2017, he played his first official match for Boa Esporte. The release was short. On the 26th of April 2017, the first panel of the Supremo Tribunal Federal declined to ratify the injunction. He has been released again on regime progression in subsequent years, granted day release to teach football to children, recaptured on infractions, and released again. In April 2025, Lula was returned to closed regime on a separate matter. after a second homicide conviction. Macarao had been released on parole in October 2018. Sergio Rosa Sales had been killed in 2012. Bruno Souza has, since his initial arrest in July 2010, been in and out of prison custody. As of May 2026, he was arrested again in São Pedro da Aldeia in the state of Rio de Janeiro. He had been declared in breach of his most recent conditional release after traveling to the state of Acre without authorization to play for a small club there. Across each of these releases, the question of whether he had identified the location of Eliza's remains has not in any documented proceeding formally weighed by the court assessing the release. The Brazilian sentencing framework contains no statutory inducement for a convicted murderer to disclose the location of remains. Sentence reductions for collaboration exist. They are narrow. They have rarely been applied in femicide context. They have not produced, in Eliza's case, the location of her body. Chapter 7, Helens Law. In the United Kingdom, the comparable case is older. Helen McCord was killed in February 1988 in St. Helens. She was 22, an insurance clerk, walking home from a bus stop on the evening of the 9th of February. She did not reach her front door. Her body has never been found. The man convicted of her killing was Ian Sims, the landlord of a pub called the George and Dragon on the route she walked. He was convicted by the Crown Court in March 1989 in one of the first English murder trials concluded on DNA evidence. Across the next 3 decades, Ian Sims maintained his innocence. He gave, in every parole interview, the same answer to the question of where Helen was. He did not know. Helen's mother, Marie McCourt, made the campaigning of those 3 decades the work of her life. Her position was that a man who refused to disclose the location of his victim's remains should not be released until he did, that a system which could not compel that disclosure had failed the family in the smallest possible. The campaign was given the name Helens Law in the public conversation. Members of parliament from both major parties carried versions of the bill across multiple sessions. In November 2020, the Prisoners' Disclosure of Information about Victims Act passed into law in the United Kingdom. It applies to murderers and manslaughters, among others. It does not inform, prohibit release. What it does is place on the face of the statute. When considering the release of a prisoner who has not disclosed information that they could reasonably be expected to disclose about the location of a victim's remains, the board must take that non-disclosure into account. The act does not require a confession. It requires only what the prisoner could reasonably be expected to know. It does not bind the board to a particular result. It places non-disclosure formally on the list of factors the board must consider. Marie McCourt died in March 2023. Helen's body has still not been recovered. Ian Sims was paroled in 2020. He died of natural causes the following year. The act survived him. Other families have invoked it, it has not by itself recovered any remains. What it has done is altered the institutional terms of release. Basically, who knows and refuses to say must, in front of the board, contend with the refusal as part of the case. It is a narrow statute. It is, in principle, an acknowledgement that securing the conviction is not the same as doing all the work the conviction was supposed to do. The Brazilian system has no equivalent. There is no parole stage statutory requirement to consider the non-disclosure of a victim's body. Chapter 8, what Brazil has not done. It is worth holding the institutional point clearly. Brazil has, since 2010, built substantial legal machinery around the prosecution of femicide. On the 9th of March 2015, the Brazilian federal government enacted Lei 13.04, the Lei do Feminicidio. It added a qualifier to Article 121 of the Penal Code classifying as feminicide a homicide committed against a woman for reasons of her gender. It placed feminicide on the list of crimes hediondos, heinous crimes, for which sentencing minima are elevated and parole conditions are restricted. The parliamentary debates that produced the law cited the Eliza Samudio case repeatedly. The doctrinal literature subsequently characterized the case as paradigmatic, not because it was the worst femicide of the decade, but because the visibility of the perpetrator had forced the legal architecture to look. The Lei do Feminicidio is now 11 years old. It is invoked in Brazilian courtrooms every week. The most recent National Security Yearbook, published in 2025 by the Fórum Brasileiro de Segurança Pública, recorded 1,422 femicides in Brazil in 2024, an average of approximately 4 per day. 63% of the victims were black women. 70% were between 18 and 44 years old. The largest category of perpetrator was a current intimate partner. Ex-partners accounted for a further 19%. The plurality of killings took place in the victim's own residence. The forensic and search machinery for the recovery of victims has not been the focus of comparable institutional attention. The numbers on unrecovered femicide victims in Brazil are not centrally collected. The Defensoria Pública in several states has begun since approximately 20 to advocate for tracking of this number. A bill that would create such a registry was proposed in the Câmara dos Deputados in 2024. As of mid-2026, it has not advanced. Sônia Fátima Silva Moura is 64. She has raised her grandson in the city of Campo Grande. On the 11th anniversary of Eliza's death in 2021, she said the sentence that has stayed in subsequent reporting: "O túmulo da minha filha e o meu quarto, my daughters. Tomb is my bedroom." She has said she buries Eliza every day. She has said she has no place to leave flowers. Her demands in the interviews she has given over the years have been consistent. They have not, in the years since 2013, been about the conviction. They have not been about the sentence. They have been about the location of her daughter's remains. They have been directed at the man who knows. Chapter 9, the Comparative Question. The Brazilian psychological literature on the families of missing persons victims uses a phrase borrowed from the American researcher Pauline Boss. It is the grief that cannot resolve because the death cannot be ritualized. There is no body to bury. There is no funeral that completes. There is no grave at which the family can leave flowers. The condition is recognized in the literature as producing chronic mental health consequences, prolonged depression, the inability to mark anniversaries and other bereaved families mark them. Brazilian work in this area builds on that international literature. The femicide-specific version has only begun to be characterized in the last decade. Why does Bruno Souza not say where Eliza is? The question has been asked in interview after interview since 2010. He has not given a direct answer. His refusals take several forms: denial, direct responsibility, claim of not remembering. There is a secondary interpretation supported by some criminal psychology commentary that the silence is itself a residual form of control, that the location of the body is the last thing he has to refuse to give, the last assertion of power over a person and a family. The fuller version of the question is structural. The Brazilian system has, since 2015, built increasingly heavy penal architecture around the killing of women. It has not built equivalent architecture around the return of the kill architecture. There is no parole stage requirement to wait disclosure. There is no sentencing stage reduction targeted at it. There's no registry of unrecovered victims that would put the question on the desk of all. The closest analog in another jurisdiction is the United Kingdom statute. Brazil has, as of 2026, no equivalent. Sonia Moura's advocacy has been, across the past decade, the most consistent voice in Brazil articulating the gap. She has spoken in legislative hearings to the press on every anniversary and to the Defensoria Publica data. Her position has not been about the conviction. Her position has been about the body, about what the family is owed. Notice she is, in Brazil, the closest equivalent to Marina Court. The argument has not, as of the time of this episode, produced a Brazilian statute. What it has produced is the consistent presence in the Brazilian conversation of a question no other parent of an unrecovered victim has yet repeated at her scale. Where is my daughter? Coda, what is owed? Eliza Samudio was 25 years old. She was born in Foz do Iguaçu on the 22nd of February, 1985. She was, by every account of those who knew her, a woman who had wanted to. She had a child she chose to keep against the wishes of his father. She lived to hold him for 16 weeks. The Brazilian femicide statistics for 2024 record 1,492 women killed for being women. Eliza is administratively one of approximately 20,000 women killed in the decade and a half since her death. One of a number whose bodies have not been recovered. The number is not known. The country has not yet built the registry that would record it. The dignity of the dead in any account of justice that has held across human cultures requires the recovery. A system that convicts the killer and cannot recover the chant. The unresolved question is the smallest one, and it is the largest one. Where is Eliza Samudio? The man who knows has been asked by the police, by the courts, by the press, by the grandmother, by the son. He has not said. The system has not made him. The body has not been found. This channel is called the Quiet Hill, but we come back to the things people did and the silences that grew around them. Subscribe, and the next one will find you.